Hey everybody, Mr. Frank here, and I've had some requests to kind of explain how our standards-based system, which is currently being used in the 6th grade, is going to work in the other grades as it moves up with kids. And so I'm going to try to do that today. And first, let's just start with the why. So in traditional grading, like to say something is a B plus doesn't really give you a great idea of the specifics. And so you can see from our little example here, going through piece by piece works a lot better. And the elementary's done this for years, and this is kind of a grading scale that they use. And our standards work very similarly. Here we use half points, and the half points indicate where a student couldn't do something independently. There's a ton of math that goes into how we do this, and this is the part where I'm going to try my best to make it simple, even though it is admittedly a little complicated. So over time, students are going to be graded on their standards, and those are going to go into the grade book by standard. And those are going to develop a bunch of marks over the course of a year because you're looking at those standards instead of in a small period of time over a much longer period of time. And so to accurately calculate that, we've got a couple of different tools that we'll use. One is a power law, the other is a decaying average, and we're going to explain a little bit how that works. And then we're going to weight those standards as well. And if you need to, you might want to just pause the video and read over the slides because I can't read everything on there and keep this thing under, 10 minutes. And I apologize because it is a little bit complicated, but the best way to look at it is just by understanding how weighted grades work, which is something that a lot of our teachers use currently to prioritize certain things over others. And so in a weighted-based system, you still calculate points, but instead of those points all being counted equally into a total average, they're put into categories, and then those categories are given weights that add up to 100%. And this basic understanding of weighted grades is really important because weights come into play a lot when dealing with standards. We have two preferred ways of weighting standards over time because there's so many. One is decaying average, which basically gives your most recent standards marks more weight than previous ones, and that allows for growth over time. And the other is a power law, which power law is great if you're giving very consistent feedback over time. Let's say spelling test would be a good example of this. You're able to kind of track a trajectory of that and then give a mark at the end for where you think it would be. It's also kind of how fantasy football projections work, except it might be a little bit more accurate because there's not really an academic equivalent of pulling your hamstring on the first play of the game. So once we use a decaying average or power law to calculate a number for a standard, we then have to weight the standard. So if we go back to our original weighted example, instead of categories, we now have standards. And so this example might be from the second semester where, say, we want to weight a recent standard more heavily and older standards a little bit less. And by putting those together and weighting them, we can calculate a final number grade. But the thing is that number grade is going to be on a 0 to 4 scale, and that causes problems because our normal percentage method is on a 0 to 100 scale. And so what a lot of people end up thinking is that we're going to use the GPA numbers. So on GPA, an A is a 4, B is a 3, and so on. But that's not accurate. Okay, that's not actually how we do it here. Instead, I want you to focus on that right side of the scale, which is where we have the Marzano method. In the Marzano method, we're going to take those weighted averages and we're going to look at them on this scale where a 3, which is proficient, is an A minus, and a 4, which would be exemplary, is an A plus, and it down from there. And then what we're hoping is this should give us a little bit more accurate grading overall that is reflective of the student's actual abilities. And hey, you guys are amazing. You've made it to the end, and I'm going to give you the greatest digital gift I can think of, which is Mrs. Heichman riding a dinosaur, and also an image of what I think her reaction to that would be. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, always reach out.